Can you get banned for careless driving? Yes, you can. You can be banned for up to a period of 2 years if you're convicted of careless driving. Uh, Unlike dangerous driving, which is mandatory if you're convicted, for careless driving, it's not mandatory if it's your first offence. If it's your first time coming to court for careless driving, the judge has a discretion as to whether or not they will disqualify you. And that discretion is based on the facts of the case, how serious the driving was, as well as your own circumstances. So arguments are invited by the judge from your lawyer as to whether or not they should disqualify you or not. But it's not mandatory on the first offence, no. What's the difference between careless driving and dangerous driving? It's effectively a matter of degree. By that I mean it depends on the consequences of your driving. If your driving causes injury to a person or damage to property, it's very likely going to be elevated from one of careless driving to one of dangerous driving. So it depends on the consequences. That's pretty much it. Everyone is expected to drive in a manner that will be expected of a competent and careful driver. What careless driving is where your driving falls below the standard of a competent and careful driver. What dangerous driving is where your driving falls far below the standard that will be expected of a competent and careful driver. So it's really a matter of degree or the severity of what happens in the driving that determines the charge you're going to get. How can police prove careless driving? In one of two ways, really. There may be CCTV footage, which is one way of helping to prove the case. It's certainly evidence. But the usual manner that these cases are proved is the same for any case, witness testimony. A witness would have made a complaint to the police about your driving, and what should happen then is that the police should go to you and say, well, look, we have a complaint from this person saying that you did drive in this way on this certain date, and they should invite you to make a response to that, and you should be given a chance to make a statement if you wish to do that. And once the statement is made, then it's up to the state to decide whether or not there's sufficient evidence to prosecute you. In the main, they prosecute everyone these days for incidents that happen on the roads these days, and so it goes into court, and then it's you giving your evidence against the other person who says that you drove carelessly, and the judge then decides which case they believe to have more merit, yours or the other person's. Is careless driving a criminal offence? Yeah, it is a criminal offence, but it's treated slightly differently to other types of offences. First of all, it's a road traffic offence. Secondly, it's not an offence that requires intention. The prosecution don't have to prove that you intended to drive in the way that you did. They just have to prove that you knew what you were doing when you were driving. It's separated from other criminal offences because of the lack of intent required. Most offences require the state to prove that you intended to commit the act. In careless driving, intention isn't required. You can't commit theft unless you intended to steal. You can't commit deception unless you intended to deceive someone. You can't commit an assault unless you intended to assault them. But you can commit careless driving even if you didn't intend to drive carelessly. What's the penalty for careless driving? Well, careless driving carries a potential disqualification of 2 years. It can carry a disqualification of up to 4 years if you've been convicted twice or more of careless driving in the previous 3 years. But if it's your first time coming to court for careless driving, as it is for most people, then the judge has a discretion not to disqualify you. And that discretion then is based on the arguments that your lawyer brings to court on your behalf to persuade the judge not to disqualify you if it's your first time coming to court for careless driving.